David Sachs, welcome to Jewish Money Matters. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be one of those juicy, deep conversations. I have a feeling because there's so much here, David. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to dive in. Okay. So basically, you are Hollywood you're a producer, Hollywood producer. You won, what is it? An Emmy, a Golden Globe, many nominations. I mean, you're a
Yeah,
superstar in your career. Let's just say it, right? Um, I guess maybe we should start there before we get to the piece of, bringing God into all this, because
sure.
I'm just going to introduce that. Your website is Living with God, and you have this awesome podcast, Spiritual Tools for an Outstanding, to deal with an outstanding world, is it?
Close. Spiritual tools for an outrageous world.
Outrageous, not outstanding. Duh. Okay. We should edit that. No, we're going to be natural here. But you're the co-founder of the Happy Minyan in LA. So there's a lot
Yeah.
here to unpack. But let's start with Hollywood. David, choosing a career. Did you know this was the path? Were you like dreaming as a little kid to be in, work on television? How did that happen?
Well, it's funny because not at all. I was actually a government major at Harvard,
I
and I
was an
thought I'd be
international relations major at Tufts
okay.
down
I
the
thought I'd be a
street.
lawyer, and maybe I don't know. Just that's the path that I thought that I was going to take, and
Oh,
never thought I really had a creative side. And then, oddly enough, just through a strange series of events, all 4 summers at college, I ended
yeah.
up being the elevator man in my building on 79th Street and Broadway in New York City. And while I was an elevator man, I just started reading like as many of the classic works of literature that I could. And
Okay.
I got so inspired by the beautiful things that I was reading, just that it made me want to be a writer. And I
Okay.
also, that sort of like intersected with it, like another thing going on in my life, which is that the school's humor magazine is the Harvard Lampoon, and
Yes.
I joined that. So there was this sort of like place for writing, and some of my peers were talking about going out to Hollywood to become writers. And so these things sort of morphed together, and it
Mm.
changed my sort of like life trajectory. And
Mm-hmm.
then I got a job when I was 21 upon graduating, basically,
Mm-hmm.
on this HBO comedy show on the writing staff. So I just everything kind of came together in this very blessed, amazing way.
Wait. This is unbelievable. So you decide you're gonna give up your dream, although your idea of going to law school, and you tell your family you're not gonna go to law school, you're just gonna go get a job in HBO, and they're okay with that.
Well, they weren't really. And getting back to the theme of your podcast, Money Matters. My dad especially was incredibly unsupportive.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit painful for me, but he was coming from a really good place.
What
And
was the place?
years into like actually getting jobs consistently out in Hollywood, which is like very hard to do.
Right.
Not that I'm taking any credit, everything was just a blessing, one after another. But my father just regularly would ask me, so when are you taking your LSATs, your law school
Right.
exams? And here I was like, actually forging a legitimate career out in Hollywood, and he just wanted to know, when am I going to go to law school?
Right.
And finally he told me that really it's not that he was being unsupportive, even if I was experiencing that, but that Hollywood is just such a roller coaster, and just you can't like rely on any sort of steady income, that he was afraid for me, and he didn't
Right.
he didn't want that for me.
Right.
And so that's kind of how my parents experienced my wanting to write for a living.
It's interesting that this conversation took that detour because, some it's a legitimate concern on some levels, right? We are parents, and like we're concerned for our child's financial future, and what's that going to be, right? Is this going to be, where is this going to lead them? But then on the other side, we see you, and we understand from a God's perspective that if a person has a talent and an inclination, to do something, and it's all God given, right? They should pursue it in that place. And then God will orchestrate everything and they're going to be financially okay. But just go pursue your livelihood where you have the talent and the inclination. And so it makes us wonder ourselves as parents, right? Do we project those fears, or do we just encourage and allow our kids to pursue?
Yeah, I have a definite perspective on this because I think that the answer very practically is somewhere in between.
Okay, let's hear it.
So what I think, and this is just me talking, you can take it or leave it, but from a parenting standpoint and from someone who has really worked in Hollywood for many, many years, I would say that you can encourage someone till they're a certain age.
Mm.
So I'm going to make up this number, and this is just me picking a number.
Okay.
24.
Okay.
You have till you're 24 to prove that you have gotten your first breakthrough job.
Uh-huh.
And after that, you know what? You can continue to be an artist. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to rip out your soul and flush it down the toilet. You don't have to experience an existential death here.
Mm-hmm.
Just, it's now your side career.
Mm.
It can still be your career. You can still be an artist. You can still write every single day. You can still make it and be a tremendous success in that field. But right now, it's your side job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I've seen many people get trapped in this idea because you hear stories about, the person who, had his big breakthrough at the age of 40. And if he hadn't or she hadn't held on, then they never would have made it. And now it's huge success. You know what I mean? But I don't think that we can make that our main reference point.
Yes, I see what you're saying.
Those things do happen, but it's a bit of, in Greek mythology, you have the sirens. Who were the sirens? They were these beautiful, mermaid type creatures who would sing this incredible song, and the sailors would come and try to hear them, and then they would crash their ships and all the sailors would die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, these stories, as inspiring as they are about people who really make it very late in life, and, to a certain extent, those can be siren calls.
Yeah. 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 So there's a middle ground where we don't have to give up the dream. We don't have to give up the creativity. We could still honor it, pursue it, but we can do other things that maybe is not our zone of genius yet, but it's our zone of excellence, and and fulfills other needs in our lives, like building a family and other important things.
Exactly. And something, and I'm incredibly sympathetic. So I'm being very hard-nosed and practical because this is a money podcast. So I know that you want to be very practical. So ideally, we're balancing the two ideals here. And especially when you talk about art, you're really talking about dreams and everything like that. So all the more so do you have to discuss that within the context of practicality, I think. So anyway, the point being that, well, I went on such a long introduction to this thought, I've forgotten the thought. So it goes. But my Rebbe, my teacher says the hardest thing in the world is for someone to have their head in the clouds and their feet on the ground.
Yes.
And really, Torah is really about having both of those things.
And so, perfect segue. Let's go there, David. God is definitely center of your life, right? And God in Hollywood is not something that we necessarily associate. So were you always this God-centered?
Well, I didn't grow up in a religious or a conventionally religious family, I should say. It was a very strongly Jewish home. I guess we were Reform, you know, so there was no Shabbos or kashrus or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there were rituals, and my parents did take Judaism seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, you know, there was a very nice, beautiful foundation there, but I came to keeping Shabbos and teaching Torah and everything like that later in life.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 24 is when I started keeping Shabbos,
Mm-hmm.
and then I started giving classes and stuff like that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years after that.
So 24 years old to become more observant, it's a time when you're probably really starting to build your career. Things are probably picking up at that point. I mean, we left off the career story at 21 going to HBO. What was happening career-wise when you make this decision, which any of us who've walked that line know it's not so easy to navigate. So
Right.
talk to us about that.
Well, you know, it's a whole kind of long story.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got, if you want to hear like the full length version of it, which it's like with lots of stories and fun jokes and things like that. If you go on YouTube, it's
Yeah.
called Sojourns in Hollywood. And my name, David Sachs. And I actually gave this talk in South Africa. And anyway, but I'll give you the short of it is they told me that if I wanted to keep Shabbos, I was on a TV show at the time. If I wanted to keep Shabbos, that I'd never work in television again.
What?
And they wanted to fire me for asking. And my partner, who is absolutely a fantastically wonderful person, and you have to hear the full context to have sympathy for him, which is well deserved, because he was going to lose his job too, because I wanted to keep Shabbos.
Because you were in this together.
Yeah, so he was going to go his separate way. So basically, my quote unquote life as I knew it was sort of like was crumbling in front of my eyes because
were you about
I
to write for a TV show? Is that what was going on?
We were on a TV show and we were partners. We had been hired together. So
to write.
Yes. So whereas he wouldn't have gotten the job without that script we co-wrote,
right?
Nonetheless, he was going to be fired because I wanted to keep Shabbos too.
Wow, this is double the pressure. It's not just you, but it's the responsibility of somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, it's a whole long story, but the bottom line is that it all worked out. I held my ground, and I knew that even if they fired me, and even if I had to find a new career, I knew nothing bad was going to happen from keeping Shabbos. I just knew nothing bad is going to happen from keeping Shabbos. And, you know, I have to say that, yeah, thank God it all worked out. We kept our jobs and everything like that. But there's this, I have to remember the historical figure who said this. It's a wonderful quote, which is that if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had this opportunity, you know, to like take a stand for something that at this point in my life I needed to do. I was desperate to do, you know, and I feel so privileged that stand that I took was on behalf of Shabbos, you know?
Absolutely. And look at you now. You definitely proved them wrong. You did make it in television, didn't you?
Yeah, thank God.
And were there other moments that you were challenged like that, you know, because this actually, it's a huge challenge. It's also a financial implication. It's your career, it's your dream, it's your livelihood, right? And you withstood that test. You're not the first one on the show who's told me these things. Did it come up other times?
Well, that was kind of like the most sort of, that was the biggest time. Yeah, that was the most make or break, because that was right when I started keeping Shabbos. And so it kind of was the major event. I mean, there have been little things along the way, but that was the big one, I would say.
Right. And I guess it's also different. Like once you've established something and everybody knows you stand for something, right? It's different than, oh, well, we didn't know. Like, what do you mean you're keeping Shabbos now? Like, yeah, right?
Yeah, yeah. And you know, getting to that place is still a journey. You know, a journey. You know?
Yeah, I definitely do know. But then let's flip it to the positive. I'm sure there's been a lot of incredibly beautiful things in your career from being a openly Jewish observant man. Tell us about some of those.
Well, I've spoken in South Africa, in Argentina, in Israel, in London, in like all these places. I'm going to Denver, God willing, next Shabbos to speak.
Nice.
I mean, it's like I've gotten emails from like the most amazing people in the most amazing places, people who have heard the podcast, who have reacted in just like incredible ways, from Jews and non-Jews both. And I just, God puts a light inside of all of us. That's our soul. And
Right.
that light that he puts inside of us, that's a piece of Hashem himself.
Yes.
And then he gives us all these life circumstances and these opportunities to shine his light into the world.
Correct.
But to shine his light in the world through the choices we get to make. So somehow we become partners with God in terms of, this incredible journey. And so yeah, I mean, I'm like a junkie for meaning. I need meaning. Like meaninglessness and boredom to me is hell itself.
Yeah.
And so, being able to kind of just go through a day, even a day where absolutely is nothing, where nothing is happening. Maybe I'm unemployed. Maybe there's a stretch of unemployment. Maybe there's like just like things are just in a dark place. And yet when you sort of like know that God absolutely illuminates the entire world and every single thing that you're doing has meaning, even if you don't see the results of it in the here and now, it's like it changes absolutely everything.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And I'm sure there's people listening to us and thinking, yeah, but like my life is totally compartmentalized. Like I don't, work is work and, religion is religion. And here we're suggesting, no, it's your relationship with God. It plays into everything. Bring it on in everything that you do in your career, in all your relationships, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's interesting because it's not just the career, David, but one of the areas where people tend to keep most distant from God is when it relates to their money, right? Not well, yeah, it's their money-making endeavors, right? Like it's so easy for people to lose sight of God. Like, this is my money. I earned it. I'm so talented. I'm so, connected or smart or strategic, or I went to Harvard or fill in the blanks, right? That it's my money. It's my doing. It's the work of my hands. What can help us not fall into this trap? You told us early on, it was all a blessing, right? Like I'm not taking credit. How can we help people not live in that delusion or illusion of self-reliance, let's say?
There's the joke which goes down in history. I think this may even be in the Guinness Book of World Records, as the one that's gotten the longest sustained laugh in like history. As far as I know, maybe this record has been broken recently, I don't know. But it was on the Jack Benny radio show. So Jack Benny was, like the biggest comedian of the day.
Yeah.
And before there was television and sitcoms and everything like that, they had that format of storytelling. It was just on the radio. But it was basically the same sitcoms that we have today.
Okay.
So Jack Benny was famous. His comedic character was that he was incredibly stingy. And so the joke was that a gunman goes up to him in the street, pulls out his gun, points it at him, and says, "Your money or your life." And Jack Benny is absolutely silent, and the gunman is getting very anxious, and he goes, "Well," and he says, I'm thinking." And that was just they started laughing and they literally couldn't stop. So believe it or not, that joke is a Rashi in the Torah.
Let's hear it.
And I'll tell you the source for it, okay? I don't think the writers knew this at the time, but it's actually a Rashi in the Torah. It says, after we say Shema, right? We say, God is one, the whole world belongs to him. And then we say, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, you should love God, right? Because if you want this system to work, if you want this system, it's gotta come from a place of love.
Right.
But by the way, you talked about compartmentalization. And, one of my favorite gematrias, money is all about numbers. So the Torah is working on a mathematical level too, where you can take two words, and if they have the same numerical value, that means that they share the same spiritual DNA, okay? It's called gematria. So the word for oneness, echad, as in God is one, echad, is the same gematria as the word ahava, which means love. Why? Love and oneness. So because when you love someone, you create oneness.
Right.
Or where there's oneness, there's love. It works both ways, okay? So we just declared God's oneness. Shema Yisrael, Shema Elokeinu, Shem Echad. God is one. The whole world belongs to God. God fills the entire world, okay? Now we have to bring that revelation into the world. How are we going to do it? Via hafta. You got to love God, because that love is going to create oneness. Okay, now it gets more specific. Love God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and then with all of your me'odecha. Ma'od is an interesting word. Ma'od actually means very. So if you want to be super literal, God is telling us, love me with all your veriness.
Veriness, right.
Meaning to say all your passion, whatever you're very about.
Your drive, right.
But if you want to go to a more classical interpretation of that, it means with your money.
Right.
Now, Rashi points out a question. He says, since you've got three things, all of your heart, all of your soul, and meaning you give up your life for God, that means all of your soul, and all of your money, well, shouldn't you reverse the last two things? Shouldn't it be love God with all of your heart, with all of your money, and all of your soul, meaning even be able to give up your life for God? And then Rashi says, no. The Torah is actually in the exact order. Money comes at the end. You know why? Because people would rather give up their life than their money.
Wow. And that's the joke there,
that's
people.
The joke.
That's the Rashi on the joke.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine? It's an outright Rashi.
It's incredible.
And by the way, Rashi, for those of you who don't know, is considered maybe the greatest Torah commentator and was writing about 1,000 years ago.
This is incredible. Now, I have so many other questions, but I want to go back and personalize this even more to your career. As your father had presented, he had a concern that life in Hollywood could have its trials, namely financial, right? There wasn't that stability of my son is in a law firm getting a steady paycheck and billing, hourly rates. Were there times where you were challenged financially and you were like, God, like what's happening here? Like talk through that process.
Yeah, it's, Hollywood is a roller coaster.
Right.
And I certainly have had that in my life, a lot of ups and downs and, financial challenges as well. And, hopefully you're saving money during the good times to protect you during, or to help you out during the harder times. So,
right.
But yeah, there is no life without challenge.
Right.
And my wife loves to quote Dennis Prager, who's quoting, I think, his best friend's mother, something like that. How's that for a chain of sources? And it goes like this: the only people who don't have problems are the people that you don't know very well.
Exactly.
And there is no life without challenges, because that is basically tied to the whole reason why there's a world and the whole reason why we're in this world. is to basically bring light to the darkness
Mm-hmm.
and to finish off creation.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we bring light to the darkness and finish off creation? By confronting challenges.
Correct.
So it's not like, if you think about it, it's interesting. If you think about the greatest people who have ever lived, I'll mention King David just to give one example, but every great figure in the Torah that falls into this category. We think, wow, they were so great. They were so beloved by God. We're talking about them till this day. They're such role models. And in their greatness, they must have achieved that place where they no longer had any problems.
And then we read.
Exactly. Then we read. And if you look at their life, it is relentless issues.
Mm-hmm.
But their greatness surprisingly came from the fact that they never gave up a sense that God was close to them amidst the problems, amidst the darkness. And that's what made them so great, not the absence of problems. And that the idea that I just want to get to that place where God doesn't bother me anymore. Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. Because, every time we're confronted with something, it's a chance to bring more light into the world. It's an opportunity. And so that's what it is. You see, I'll tell you something very, very deep. People confuse concealment, meaning the fact that God hides his face sometimes, with abandonment. Concealment is not abandonment. Concealment is not abandonment.
So
God
good.
is as present in this dimension as he is in the highest heavens. We just can't see him, but there is no contradiction.
So good. So to distill this for listeners, there was such a beautiful answer to the question. You did allude to the savings account, but really what you're saying here, David, is, yeah, it's nice if you did the right financial thing and save money for when, the year of the skinny cows, but really it's bringing God into the picture. That's what's really going to get you through this. It's not really the savings account.
Yeah. I mean, I'm remembering now what it is that I wanted to tell you about 10 minutes ago.
Oh, let's hear it.
Yeah. And that is, people want to pursue their art often.
Yeah.
And then let's say, you're 24. That was the sort of like age that I kind of made up. Obviously, it's going to depend on the person. Right. Where you say, okay, you have till this age, whatever it is, to make your breakthrough. And if you haven't established what looks like a legitimate career, then keep on doing your art, but you've got to have your main source of steady income. And the thing is that a lot of people with an artistic bent might say, and I'm talking from the male perspective right now, you know what, if a woman really loves me, then she'll support me in my art. And if she's going to be so, money grubbing and horribly materialistic, then she's not for me, and I don't want someone like that. And I think a lot of people feel that that's a legitimate point of view, but I want to suggest that a wife who feels as though the rent can be paid every month is not being horribly materialistic and is not being a monster, and that is a very reasonable expectation for a person to have. And there's a certain moment of maturity that a person has to confront and accept, where they have to say, something, there is this thing called building a family. There is this thing called marrying someone and creating a safe environment to the extent that I can.
Right.
And there is tremendous value in that, like huge value, like existential, beyond my own life value, more so than, wouldn't it be great to, beyond the Simpsons.
Yes.
And so I just want to put that out there, because I think that younger people can feel very sort of like legitimized in a point of view which ultimately may not really be as based in integrity and values as they think it is at that moment in their life.
I think it's so incredible that you brought this up, and especially coming from you, an artist, right? That you're able to have this perspective, because you are right. There is a lot of this narrative too that, you have to pursue the dream and you have to pursue the art and, at all cost and all the thing. And you've literally just tempered it for us and saying, no, it's not that it's not all or nothing. And it's even actually, you're making me think that, and again, I'm bringing it to the men. We could have a whole discussion about women, but men do have an obligation in a marriage to support their family. So there is a contractual agreement. Yes, the woman can contribute. Obviously, we're nothing. Nowhere does it say she couldn't or she shouldn't.
And if it's their arrangement, the man can be a house husband and the woman can be the main.
100%.
But if that is their arrangement.
If that is their arrangement, but there is a responsibility that's been placed upon him to contribute something, whatever, they could arrange it another way too. So it's interesting that you say that, because in today's day and age, I think we needed that reminder.
Yeah, I think so. Because, and again, what I want to go back to is this idea, we have this concept in Jewish thought of the Yetzer Hara.
Right.
Which means sort of the negative inclination.
And,
if you think of it in sort of like the classic movie sense, you've got like sort of like an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other shoulder, and you're in between trying to decide between the two whisperings going on. And believe it or not, while that's not exactly 100% accurate, it's pretty darn close to being what the Torah says. Pretty close. So the idea is that the Yetzer Hara, that dark side, wants to tell us that if we compromise our dream, we have given up our dream.
Right.
And so the idea is it tries to put this stranglehold of a false all or nothing on you when it really doesn't apply. There's no reason why a person can't continue to be an artist and make art and everything like that, and even sell their art, and even blossom into a full-time artist. But they have to balance the big picture and the choices in their life. And they have to say, something, at this point, it has to go to the side. It doesn't have to disappear, even though my instincts and my most primal animalistic instincts are telling me that if I put it into the side, that is equal to it disappearing. That's a lie. That's a lie. That doesn't have to be the case. And maybe, it even has to go on hold where I won't even be able to do it for a period of time. But again, that doesn't mean that it disappears or that you have to abandon it.
So good. So good. I love the practicality here. And there's another flip side to this, which is the starving artist kind of like myth. And if, if I don't want to, how could I just monetize this? Like, how could I put a price on it? Like, so many artists also struggle on that end of, like, no, how could I sell it? And, it's like, what do you mean?
Right. I mean, art can be narcissism,
right.
And art can be vanity as well. Arrogance is something that is always available to every person till the last moment of their life. A person has to guard themselves against arrogance, and it even enters into the field of art and creativity and things like that. So these are just like kind of like the facts. Everyone is vulnerable to it and has to protect against it.
Yeah. We have to know that we have those two voices, and we have to know which one is talking, right?
Right. Along those lines, there's a very famous teaching, but there's a second part to this teaching that most people don't know. And the famous teaching is, often it's said in the name of the Kutzker Rebbe, which is that a person has to carry two pieces of paper with them, one in each pocket. One is that the entire world was made just for me, and the other piece of paper is that I'm just dust and ashes.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's what most people know, but they don't know this second part of the teaching, which is really, in some ways, the main part of the teaching, which is once you have those two pieces of paper, you have to know when to pull out which one.
Exactly.
You see, if someone insults you or doesn't give you honor, or you show up at some occasion and all of your peers are put at the front table and you're in the back, right? You can pull out at that moment the paper, the entire world was made just for me, and say, what the hell? Why am I not at that table? But that's the wrong paper to pull out at that moment.
Correct.
You have to pull out, I'm just dust and ashes. You know what? I'm
Mhm.
just happy to be invited to this event. It's so nice that they wanted to share this occasion with me. I'm just so happy for their happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. David, we've brought God into this whole picture here. It's an important piece of a whole, earning a living conversation, all of it. I mean, it's a life, right? God, a lot, I know you know this, like a life without God is, I don't know what it is at this point. But one of the things that people struggle with is, this idea of trusting and absolute trust in God. And I always tell and on the show and my students and everything that when it comes to our financial system, let's call it, right, our financial lives, and this applies to business too, the foundation of the entire system is really trusting God, is really bitachon, right? And if that foundation is not being nourished, you could have the perfect system, the perfect mechanics, the perfect investments, but the whole foundation is shaky. But people struggle with the concept, okay, I have to trust, and I also have to do, right? I have to put effort. We've talked about it, right? It doesn't, you work to, prove your career. And if that's not playing out, you do something else until that materializes. But you have to be engaged in the world. You have to be doing. You're not sitting in Puerto Rico drinking a pina colada and expecting to fall from heaven, even though it is coming from heaven, regardless, right? So people have a hard time, we all do, with that tension between trusting and putting in the effort. How can you help them there? What's your take?
Well, it's a big subject. It's a big subject. You have to put in the work, as you're saying, and you have to trust. Yeah, there's many, 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 many things that you can say on this subject. What I would like to address is, what does it mean to trust? What is bitachon? And what I heard, I saw it in from Rabbeinu Bachaya,
right? The gate
in
of
the
trust.
Shar Emuna,
Shar bitachon.
The gates of trust, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new edition that's out that I'm sort of slowly reading that I highly recommend.
Yes, the Felig edition.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Yeah, the white and blue book.
No, this one is like a brown cover.
Oh,
yeah.
I need to find out about that new one.
Yeah, it's really excellent. A lot of notes on it below that explain things, and they bring an explanation from Rav Soloveitchik, like one of the earlier Rav Soloveitchiks. And basically, I'll just summarize it. He says that real bitachon, real trust, is not is the end, not a means. And what he means by that is that a person can be very, very wealthy and still be filled with anxiety. What's going to happen to all my investments? Like maybe the stock market, maybe we're headed. I heard this great quote a little while ago, which is that economists have predicted 10 out of the last 3 recessions. So there's always like this wave of bad news that sometimes materializes and often doesn't materialize.
Right.
But if you're like really locked into all these prognosticators,
Right.
you can have like millions of dollars in the bank and
Right.
not a good night's sleep.
Correct.
So in other words, what gives you the good night's sleep? Is it the $10 million in the bank? That certainly probably can help quite a bit. But if you're of a particular personality, it doesn't do the job.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you ultimately are just thinking about all the things that can go wrong, you'll never have rest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. That then means that true peace of mind comes from just your mental state,
Correct.
not what's in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
And arriving at that mental state, which we'll call bitachon,
Mm-hmm.
trust, is the ultimate asset.
Yes. I love it. Yes, yes. And that example of the $10 million in the bank, I think Rabbi Novachia goes through it with the example of the alchemist, right? How he narrates how the alchemist or modern day counterfeiter, how, he will still be faulty because, and a person with bitachon will actually be superior to the alchemist in 10 ways, which is, if anybody's listening, they should open the book and learn it. Let's go to Simcha, David, because, well, you're in Hollywood, you write fun stuff, and it is the month of Adar, right? We're having this conversation right in the time of year where, we have to increase in Simcha. And very often we've heard about that there might be a connection between, having real Simcha, real joy, and wealth and prosperity. Do you think there's a connection there? How could Simcha help us?
Well, something, my Rebbe, Reb Shlomo Karlovac, talked about this a lot, and he said not so much that joy brings wealth, but he did address these topics, from Rebbe Nachman of Breslov quite a bit.
Uh-huh.
Well, one thing that he said that I thought was fascinating in the name of Rebbe Nachman is that everybody is sad because their lives are falling apart, that like nothing is going right in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So they're sad. But what they don't realize is that nothing is going right in their lives because they're sad. And
Right.
and so the thing is that, and I think that, anyone who just thinks about it just instinctually knows what I'm about to say is true. No one likes being around sad people.
Right.
It's a real drag to be around people who are depressed and who are sad. I use that word depressed with
right.
caution, because I'm not talking about clinical depression and everything like that. That's a whole separate category.
Correct.
I'm just talking about pessimistic, complaining type people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
No one wants to be around those people. And a lot of times those people are also suffering financially.
Yeah.
And the thing is that if a person is just filled with joy, everyone wants to be around you.
Exactly.
And when everyone wants to be around you, just organically, just in the here and now, without getting mystical at all, in the here and now, they engage in conversations with you. They talk about different things going on in their life, different opportunities, just sort of like very organically and spontaneously arise, just in the here and now. And it just comes from being someone who's upbeat, who people want to be around.
Correct. 100%. 100%. And it's so obvious, but it still needs to be said. You know what I mean? Like you said, instinctively we know it, but it does need to be said. There's a certain levity and joy that you can exude that just makes people want to be around you, and opportunities just fall on your lap because people want to do business and work and create projects with people that it's easy to hang around with, to be with, right?
Yeah.
Which, might lead to wealth, or it might just lead to fulfillment, or both at the same time, but it's certainly a better way of living.
For sure.
And, I don't know why I'm thinking of asking you this question. It's probably because I just had a hard conversation with a group of women where you may have seen this before, David, where people struggle, maybe not exclusively women, maybe men too, but with this self-doubt and this like, I'm afraid to do this and it's going to disappoint and it's not going to deliver. And, who am I to do this? Who am I to tell them that I have this offer or this service or this idea for this business or this whatever? And in going back to this idea of the ego and the two voices, it's this ego is like stopping people from serving, from putting their thing out in the world. What can we tell them?
Well, everyone is plagued by doubt, and that's men and women both. And like, I'll just tell you something. My Rebbe would say the most brilliant Devar Torah is the most brilliant things that people will be learning for generations and generations.
Mm-hmm.
And I would sit there like listening to him say them in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And then more than once, he would come up to me and whisper in my ear, "Was that okay?"
Mm.
And my father, he should rest in peace, was a psychologist for 50 years. And he would say, no one ever outgrows the need to be validated.
Validated, right.
No one ever outgrows the need to be validated. In other words, here someone is saying something literally, I'm watching in real time. He's saying words that will be learned for the ages.
Mm-hmm.
And he's wondering, did I say anything of any use?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? So I personally experienced it in real time. And so everyone has doubt. And the thing is that ultimately, God can make absolutely the worst idea in the world work. And he can also make the best idea in the world not work.
Right.
And that ultimately, it's just a blessing for God. And what we have to do is just make a vessel.
There you go.
And that's it. Remember, the results are in God's hands, but he looks to us to make the effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so what we have to do is we just say, okay, this is what I got. And if I've shown it to a couple of people who are reliable gauges of what the industry standard is,
Mm-hmm.
does this thing that I've created meet the industry standard for professionalism?
Mm-hmm.
As long as it does, now it's up to God.
Yeah.
Can it be better? Everything can always be better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you know something, at a certain point, you've done what you need to do.
Right.
And now you just have to move forward and allow it to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Allow it to fail if it's going to fail, and then you'll do the next thing. That's all.
Right. And the failure is feedback, and you learn from the failure and you move on. And
exactly. Because otherwise, the alternative is that deep down what the person is saying, and they're probably not aware of it, and I'm sure I'm guilty of this all the time. If they are holding on to it, they're saying that ultimately, I am the person who's going to make it a success.
Right.
And while that is good to a certain extent, it's only good, and this now gets back to your question earlier about effort versus faith. The dividing line is once you have met the industry standard. Now, obviously, you want to do your best job, but you don't want to be a fanatic about it. Once you've met the industry standard, then you put it out there.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Right.
And then you go on to the next. Because the result is going to be coming from God, not from you.
So again, getting the ego, getting the I out of the way and saying, okay, God, you gave me this idea, you gave me this talent, I got to put it out there, right? And I'm going to do a good job because I represent God in the world. And then it's up to God, and I'm going to learn through the process and whatever God wants. And you said something really beautiful here about validating, that people need validation, which really is a lesson to us also on the other side in terms of the opportunity that it gives us to, be kind to people and validate people. Very often I've seen this happen where instead of reaffirming somebody else or giving them a kind word when they came off the stage or when they finished something, right, or said something, right, there was a missed opportunity for kindness. And to have that sensitivity that everybody wants to be seen, everybody wants to be validated, and we're played with opportunities to spread kindness around us, and we need to be alert and take them.
Someone told me one time, when I was younger, and maybe I had just come out to Hollywood, or maybe I was still in college, and it was a woman who told me this. She said, there are two moments where you have to give your wife a compliment when you're going out. One, right before you leave the house. She's very concerned. How does she look?
Right.
And then one, right as she's about to enter the event. She's very concerned. So those are two moments where you have to be mindful to compliment your wife. And, the reason why I'm saying that is because you said, like, when you leave the stage, so you're a public speaker, I'm also a public speaker. After you give a speech, you don't have to hear that you gave a good speech. You hope that it was a good speech. You just tried very hard. It's nice to hear that you gave a good speech. The person doesn't have to tell you that.
Right. They
but
don't.
It is always nice to hear.
Right. But it's an opportunity for kindness. Right.
But again, just to sensitize people that, right. And then I'm sure there are a million other examples other than these two.
100%.
These are examples. And it's a real thing. It's a real thing.
100%. 100%. David, in marriage, you mentioned your wife and how she put up with life in Hollywood and the uncertainty. You know it, that for many couples, money can be such a tense topic. And, obviously God doesn't want that, right? God wants the contrary, that money should be something that unites them, that allows them to implement shared values and all sorts of goodness. And yet we see in the world that the opposite happens. How have you and your wife navigated your relationship and money in the relationship? What are some practical tips?
Well, I learned early on that the blessing of wealth comes through your wife. So I always felt like, all of our money, that whatever I'm making is our money, that it's not my money that I'm sharing with her. It's whatever comes in is ours.
Right.
And not, sometimes when things are tighter, you might sort of like raise an eyebrow at what the other person is spending.
Right.
But, not to make that big a deal out of it, unless it's something that's truly irresponsible and is like really going to derail things. And then just be loving and compassionate, because money takes on many forms. And for many people, money is a sense of security and that everything is going to be okay, and reassurance. And you see that in real life, money and everything being okay actually have, sometimes there's an overlap, but
sometimes
very often there is no overlap whatsoever.
Right.
God forbid tragedies happen to all kinds of people. God forbid, God forbid. And so, sometimes that paycheck can create a sense of security, and sometimes just a hug and an I love you and a we're going to get through this together is going to be worth more than a paycheck.
Yes. So important to be said. And it's an important reminder, especially sometimes for the men. Sometimes the men need that reminder. Who you are when there is no money. Be that person for her, because even when the money comes, you still need to be that person, right? You still need to meet that need for love, affection, security. Like, you're not just a paycheck. You're not just a bank teller. And sometimes it's hard for men to realize when there's a downturn, let's say.
And, if a woman says that to the man during that time, it goes back to actually what I wanted to say a little bit earlier about validating and everything like that. My Rebbe would use this phrase that it's so true. He'd say, you're giving the other person life.
Mhm.
The idea that we can give each other life. Like normally speaking, you think, well, just only God can give life. But no,
Mhm.
we actually can give life to each other. And it often takes the form of just those validating
Yeah.
words, you know, during moments of vulnerableness.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, and we forget that our spouses need it. It's not just our children, right? We say, "Oh, it's no," but also the adults in our lives. David, I always like to wrap up the show with what I call Jewish Money Matters fill in the blanks. And this is the part of the show where I'll give you an open-ended sentence and you'll finish it with the first thing that comes to mind. All right?
Okay, sure.
Awesome. Okay. When I give Meiser or Tzedakah, I like to give to.
The Happy Minyan of Los Angeles.
Oh, good. I'm glad you put a plug there. Very, very good. You guys got a new
That-
location recently, didn't you?
yeah, and it's so expensive. Please send money. Send money. We need it.
How many years ago did you start this Minyan?
This is about we're I think in our 27th year. We're like an independent grassroots organization, just sort of like just trying to celebrate life, celebrate God, celebrate the Torah. And it's like a lot of creative people, and people come
Really?
in and they dance, they sing, and you know, it's like it's an amazing transformative experience for people. And anyway, if you can support it, it's Happy Minyan,
Mm-hmm.
MINYAN.org, and keep us going. It's keeping the whole Jewish people in the world going too.
I love it. I love it. I'd love to make more money because that's
So I
the
can do
next
more
one.
good.
You could do more good. Nice. You could do more good. Support more happy minyanim and all the things, all the good things. Something I wish I'd learned about money growing up is
It goes up and down.
right. Money, spiritual or physical?
Spiritual.
Something I splurge on unapologetically is
Comic books. Old ones, old vintage, obscure art pieces.
But the funny part is that you weren't into that or as a teen, were you?
You know, I don't read them honestly, but I guess I like graphic art, and sometimes you get introduced to something as a kid and it just kind of gets in your bones and doesn't go away.
Are you also an animator? No, you're a writer,
I'm
right?
not an animator, no, but you know, I watched cartoons growing up, and somehow animation and graphic art has always just been a love of mine.
Awesome. David Sachs, spender or saver?
Spender.
Is your wife also spender or is she balance it out? Is she the saver?
I think spender.
That's a dangerous combination.
Yes, it is.
Especially living in LA.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Oh my gosh. I'm a spender too. No worries. I've become a saver, I guess, but I'm naturally a spender. Today, I'm most grateful for.
God.
Good for you. And finally, I'm David Sachs, and I believe Jewish money matters because.
It really does.
It really, really does. David, what's next? I mean, you're traveling, you're speaking, you have this awesome podcast, you have your full-time work, right? What else is exciting? And you have Happy Minyan. What else is in the works?
I've just written my first book. It's going to come out probably in a year. It's
How did I not know that? That's awesome.
well, you know, because it's not out yet, and maybe you'll have me back when it gets published.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What is the book? Tell us about
It's called the Book of Closeness.
Wow.
And it's like stories, and I just everything is like a one-page chapter. And the idea is like kind of like really just short little stories and thoughts that are very deep, very clear, and will sometimes make you laugh.
I love it. I love it. I think it's so needed. You know, we learn through stories. That's the bottom line. We learn through stories. And in this day and age, anything that is short and gets to the point of it. And if it can make us laugh too, you know, if it has like that twist, it's like incredible. Well done. I can't wait to read it, David. I can't wait.
Thank you.
That's awesome. And of course, the podcast is Spiritual Tools for an Outrageous World. This time I got it right. And it's everywhere on Apple Podcasts. And we will be sure to follow, listen. It's really, really good. Congratulations. David, thank you so much. This was so insightful. I absolutely loved it.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.